I hate hit points. Okay, I don't hate them, but I don't like how certain bigger titterpigs implement them. They aren't very interesting, and frankly, there are just too dang many of them eventually. Why do you need all these hit points, huh? What are you gonna do with that? I'm sure some of you are already composing some comments in your head. Oh, no more hit points. Sure, heaven forbid we have a method of keeping track of a player character's well-being and actually adding some stakes to our games. What if I told you there are more elegant ways to do just that? Simpler ways, or even more complex ways that do more than just allow us to calculate what percentage of alive someone is. Let's talk about just what hit points are and why I don't have much love for how they've been implemented in games, specifically like D&D. And unlike a round of combat in D&D, let's be relatively quick about this. First, my complaint that hit points are boring. Your player exists in a binary state of either just fine or unconscious and dying. Are you down to your last hit point out of 115? No worries, that doesn't impact your performance whatsoever. Lose that last 1 HP and then suddenly you're pressing your life alert necklace. This is typically done to avoid what is called the death spiral. The idea that if you start taking on negative attributes as your health goes down, that just means you're more likely to lose health even faster. So if you start to die a little, you'll quickly die a lot, because you don't have allies who could help you out in any way that would better highlight group dynamics and teamwork over individuals. Plus, if that happened to players, it would probably have to happen to enemies, which would just make combat move so much faster, and we can't have that! Second complaint, too many ding-dang hit points. You level up, you get more hit points, but then the enemies you face also gain more hit points. But don't worry, because you can do more hit points of damage, but they can do more hit points of damage too to balance things out with the fact that you have more hit points. Look, if all the numbers go up so much, then why do numbers need to go up at all?
Everyone can be super.
To differentiate the power levels of low-level encounters and high-level encounters, there are more interesting ways to do that beyond just bigger numbers mean bigger stakes.
It's over 9,000!
And hey, if you disagree with me and enjoy both of those things, you're dumb and wrong! I'm kidding, it's totally fine to enjoy those mechanics. But I think, like me, there are plenty of people out there who either actively dislike them or just don't even think about them because they're basically the accounting of trad games. All the fun of balancing your checkbook as a wizard. I mean, if you are gonna have a character's health represented by hit points, simplify it. For instance, Quest gives every character 10 hit points, and that's all you will ever have, period. When you encounter an enemy, they'll either be considered a commoner, a minion, or a boss, and each of those types has a baseline damage they deal, either 1, 2, or 4. It also determines how much health they have, 2, 4, or 10, though both NPC damage and health can be adjusted to make them unique. Since players by default deal 2 damage with abilities and special items increasing that, we're still balancing a checkbook, but we're balancing like the easiest checkbook you can imagine. With hit points like that, it becomes way easier to determine how difficult combat is. Sicking 10 commoners on your party is big fun and will be done quick since they can be taken out in 1 hit, and so on. How about even easier, like they do in EZD6, where almost every character has 3 hits, with the tanky berserker having 5. Most enemies deal 1 hit of damage, and more dangerous ones dealing 2 or 3. And yeah, enemies can only take so many hits as well, of which players typically can deal 1. If some enemies deal 3 and you can only take 3, don't worry. You can roll armor to potentially reduce a hit by 1, and spend resources to help make sure that happens a lot of the time. It's super simple, makes combat fly really fast, and also means every single hit is meaningful because it likely accounts for 1/3 of your total health. If that's too simple, then try out Die, the role-playing game. In Die, you still likely only have 3 or 4 hit points, but you also have Guard, which are like buffer hit points. You typically lose those in combat first, but then regain them after combat, or even sometimes during combat. That also means that every time you actually lose a precious hit point, it's worth at least a little concern. Okay, so there are plenty of games that at least make balancing your body checkbook faster and more meaningful, but I want health systems that are more engaging. Well, if you thought Die's guard mechanic was engaging, then you might also like Fate's stress system, which is much the same. take a hit in Fate, which has what's called a shift value, let's say 3, and so long as you've got 3 stress-free, you mark those. At the end of a scene, your stress clears. However, if you take too big of a hit or you don't have stress to absorb a hit, then you'll take a consequence. This is a bespoke condition your character will suffer that the GM can use against you. If you suffer a slice across the arm, well, the GM might decide to make using that arm a little tougher on you. You are hurt, and it actually interacts with the rest of the system in an interesting way that isn't just, oh no, I lost some of my numbers. Consequences are great because they are such interesting complications. Complications being what this same concept is called in Cortex Prime. In Cortex Prime, at least in the most common mods of this very modular game, when you take damage, you'll gain a complication with a die value. Enemies can take those complication die and add them to their dice pools when your complication would work against you. What makes this fun is not only does this also work the other way around, allowing you to use enemies' complications against them, but complications also aren't just for tracking physical hits. They can also track mental well-being, note so can Fate's consequences, and any number of other conditions. You could have a poisons complication, a dizzy complication, a butt hurt because you were bested in a rap battle complication. I am not joking. It's not just a health system, and the stuff you can do with it, especially if you start using some of the system's mods, is absolutely amazing. Now, take those complications and instead of giving them die ratings, instead give them numerical values between 1 and 5 that are just added or subtracted from a roll, and we've got City of Mist. Does all that sound a little too open and complicated? Maybe you just want there to be a couple complications describing various levels of harm that you've taken, but with just a few specific ways they affect your character. Make this harm somewhat difficult to get rid of, but also be sure to give players a variety of ways to avoid harm to find that perfect balance between it being meaningful but not frustrating, and we've just found ourselves in Blades in the Dark. Custom ways to denote harm and a separate track called Stress that you can use to avoid harm or get other benefits. Honestly, that's one of the things I love about stress. It's fairly integral to your physical well-being in that way, but it can also be used for beneficial stuff like making things easier or using special abilities. Risk-reward mechanics that tie to your health are such a blast, just like it is in the Cypher system, where you have your character's might, speed, and intellect, 3 pools of points that represent your overall well-being, but are also used to make tasks easier and power your abilities. Plus, if one of those pools is empty, you take on a condition that will make life harder. 2 empty pools and you're struggling, and 3 empty pools, well, the only thing that won't be empty at that point is your grave. Dang, that's a lot of ways to track your character's physical health. You want to know another alternative? Don't track it. Stop it.
Stop it.
Look at games like Masks or Thirsty Sword Lesbians, 2 big names in the diverse Powered by the Apocalypse family. Sure, you have conditions in these games, but those focus on your character's emotional state. If you're in a fight in either of these games, you're probably taking all kinds of hits narratively. Eventually, if your character suffers a big hit, which will be impacted by your conditions, you might be taken out of combat, but that doesn't even mean you're knocked unconscious. You might be taken out of combat because you decide to run away. At no point do we need to figure out what % of alive your character is, because it isn't important to those games. So, health can be not at all important, or super important but simple, or super important but strategic and more complex, or I'm sure any number of other possibilities I haven't covered. Hell, I didn't even talk about how Rhapsody of Blood, one of my top 3 games of all time, represents the health of major enemies as notable aspects of that enemy, and taking out an aspect also changes the fight by removing abilities from that enemy. Oh, hey, look at that, I did talk about it. Good for me. Your character's health, especially in a game with a lot of combat or where the threat of death is a part of the draw, doesn't have to just be a matter of bookkeeping. But also, if you don't want to engage with that stuff on a deeper level and just want those big numbers, then by all means, keep playing hit point games. I just hope I've shown you that there are all kinds of possibilities out there that are worth trying out. Or maybe there are possibilities we haven't even thought up yet. It's me, Klaus at the end of the video. Thanks everybody for watching. Originally this video was going to cover way more topics like all the different things in like D&D and Pathfinder and stuff that I don't personally connect with, but that I find other games have different solutions. And the script started getting bigger and more unwieldy. And then I was like, you know what? I have so much to say about just hit points in and of themselves. It's such a big topic for me that I figure, you know, I'm just gonna make a video just about that. So I don't know, I hope this worked. Anyway, still working on how to play Blades in the Dark. Hopefully that will be up fairly soon. I don't know if it'll be the next video or not, because so much work goes into the how to play videos as I just figure out how to best present it and go forward with it and all that kind of stuff. The quest one was kind of easy, and that took me like a year, so this won't take that long. Probably.